Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We're going to be tackling a topic that's super relevant for your UPSC prep. It pops up in both prelims and mains, so listen closely. Today we're dissecting the economic engine of South India.
Right on, and we'll be basing our deep dive on a recent piece from The Hindu, so you know it's right up to date.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The Chief Economic Advisor, the CEA, recently made some waves by saying that southern states should benchmark themselves against global standards, not just Indian ones. What makes him think the South has what it takes to compete on a global scale?
Well, one of the things that stands out is the South's massive contribution to India's GDP.
How massive are we talking?
We're talking a whopping 30%. Just 5 states in the South are generating nearly a third of the nation's economic output.
30%, that's huge. But does that translate into a better quality of life for the people actually living there?
That's where per capita GDP growth comes in. The South is seeing over 5% growth in this indicator, compared to 4.2% for the rest of India. And you know what that suggests? A higher standard of living and overall prosperity in the region.
So it's not just about the size of the economy, but how that wealth actually reaches people's lives. Makes sense. But how did the South become such an economic powerhouse in the first place? Was it a recent thing, or are there deeper roots?
The historical context is actually pretty fascinating. Unlike the North, which went through a lot of invasions and political instability, the South was relatively stable for centuries. This allowed for consistent economic and cultural development, which laid the foundation for the success we see today.
So stability equals prosperity. Makes sense. But were there other specific factors that contributed to this early economic edge in the South?
Absolutely. Think back to ancient India. The south was a hub for some major trade centers. Vijayanagara, Madurai, Kochi, they were buzzing with commerce. They fostered trade within India and with the whole world, really instilling that culture of entrepreneurship and trade. It gave them a head start in the global trade game.
It sounds like they were well connected even way back then. But didn't British colonialism also play a role in shaping the South's economy?
Definitely. Fast forward to the 18th century, and you see Madras and Bombay rising as major presidency towns under British rule. These cities became centers of administration and trade, which further accelerated development in the South.
So those historical advantages, from ancient trade routes to the influences of colonialism, really set the stage. But how did these factors play out after India gained independence, especially after those economic liberalization reforms in the 1990s?
That's the key question, and that's where all this historical context really comes in. The South was primed to benefit from the liberalization policies. They already had some infrastructure and a relatively skilled workforce. They became magnets for investment, both domestic and foreign, leading to rapid growth in key sectors.
So when India opened up its economy, the South was ready to capitalize on those opportunities. What were some of the sectors where they really took off?
Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, for example, became major players in automobiles, textiles, and of course the booming IT industry.
Bengaluru, India's Silicon Valley.
Right, these are sectors that are constantly making headlines, and the South is right at the forefront.
Absolutely. Those are the big ones we always hear about. Were there any other surprises sectors we might not immediately think of when we think of the South?
Definitely. Telangana's emergence as a powerhouse in biotech and pharma is a fascinating one.
Okay, yeah, I've heard about that.
They contribute to a third of the global vaccine output. It really highlights how impactful the South is, not just within India, but on a global scale.
A third of global vaccine output. That's incredible. But is this growth story the same across all of India? What about the North and Northeast?
Sadly, no. While there's been progress in states like Maharashtra and Gujarat, India's growth story is kind of uneven. Many northern states don't have major urban centers like the South, which can hold back economic opportunities. And the Northeast has a whole other set of hurdles with things like border disputes, infrastructure issues, and limited connectivity, making it tough to keep pace.
So different regions are facing very different realities. It sounds like the South's success goes beyond just industry. What other factors are driving their growth?
Agriculture plays a key role. States like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka have embraced modern farming techniques and diversified their crops.
Interesting.
It's a sharp contrast with states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, which rely on traditional crops and haven't seen the same level of agricultural productivity.
So it's not just what you grow, but how you grow it. Innovation and technology seem key here.
Exactly. And that innovative spirit extends to governance as well. Telangana and Karnataka have really led the way with IT and e-governance reforms. They've made their administration more efficient and citizen-friendly.
Streamlining and modernizing government processes.
Right. These initiatives haven't just improved governance, they've actually contributed to economic growth.
So they're using tech to drive progress on multiple fronts. But we haven't really touched on a crucial element: Social development, how does that fit into the South's success story?
This is where it gets interesting. At independence, many southern states were actually less developed than parts of the North.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
But they made some strategic choices that paid off big time in the long run.
Like what? What set them on a different path?
Well, they prioritized controlled population growth, which meant they could allocate resources more effectively. They also put a huge emphasis on education, which led to a more skilled and literate workforce, and ultimately a workforce that could compete in a globalized economy.
So investing in human capital was a key part of their strategy. Do we see a big difference in literacy rates between the South and North?
Big time. Literacy rates are much higher in the South. Kerala, for instance, boasts a 96.2% literacy rate.
Wow, 96.2%. That's amazing. What were some of the specific things they did that led to this kind of success in education?
Well, Tamil Nadu's midday meal program was a game changer, boosting enrollment and improving nutrition for kids. Plus, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana focused on expanding English medium education, giving their workforce valuable language skills that are in high demand globally.
It sounds like these proactive policies really laid the groundwork. But why haven't other regions, especially those facing similar challenges, been able to do the same? What's holding them back?
One key factor is the level of investment in education and infrastructure. Some northern states haven't been able to allocate enough resources to these critical areas. There are a lot of reasons why, but it highlights the need for a long-term vision and sustained investment in human capital.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the most impactful investments aren't in flashy projects, but in the people themselves. Beyond education, how do health and social indicators compare?
Generally, southern states also do really well in healthcare.
Okay,
Kerala, again, is a great example. They have a remarkably low infant mortality rate, just 6 per 1,000 births.
6 per thousand. That's unbelievably low. What goes into a number like that? It says a lot about a healthcare system.
Absolutely. And it's not just infant mortality. The maternal mortality ratio in the South is also lower than the national average, meaning better healthcare for mothers. It reflects a holistic approach to healthcare, prioritizing the well-being of women and children.
It's clear that the South has prioritized social development along with economic growth. We've mostly focused on human factors so far, but you mentioned something about natural advantages too, right? What role does geography play?
You're right. The South has some geographic perks that contribute to their economic edge. Their proximity to ports like Chennai and Kochi really helps with trade and exports.
Makes sense, easier access to global markets.
Right. Plus, the climate in much of the South is moderate, which is great for agriculture, tourism, and overall living conditions. It's a big difference from the extreme weather some northern regions face.
So it's a combo of human ingenuity, smart policy choices, and maybe a little help from Mother Nature that's gotten the South to where it is today. But no region is without its challenges, right? What are some hurdles the South faces as it tries to maintain this growth?
That's a great point. Despite all the positives, the South isn't immune to economic headwinds. One big concern is the productivity gap in manufacturing.
What do you mean? Don't they have a strong workforce?
They do, but their contribution to total manufacturing output is still relatively low. It suggests there's room for improvement when it comes to efficiency and productivity.
So it's not just about having workers, it's about having highly skilled workers who can create high-value goods, which is what we see in those more advanced economies. What other challenges should we keep in mind?
Skill development is another one. While the South has a solid workforce with intermediate skills, there's a lag when it comes to those more advanced professional skills, especially in fields like AI, engineering, and high tech.
So they need to upskill their workforce to stay competitive in this rapidly changing global economy. If they don't address that skills gap, what are the implications?
Well, if there's not enough investment in higher education and research, it could really hinder innovation and the creation of those well-paying jobs in cutting-edge industries. It creates this cycle where a lack of investment leads to a skills gap, and that then limits future growth potential.
That's a crucial insight, especially for policymakers. So it's not just about attracting investment, it's about cultivating the talent and the innovation that will drive future growth. Okay, what other challenges are on the horizon for the South?
Demographics are another concern. The South is dealing with declining birth rates, and then you add immigration to that, people leaving for better opportunities abroad.
Okay, yeah.
This could lead to labor shortages down the line, making it harder to sustain that economic growth.
That's something a lot of developed economies face, figuring out how to attract and keep talent in this globalized world. They'll need to look at policies that incentivize people to stay and also attract skilled workers from other parts of India or even globally. What about infrastructure? We always hear about India's infrastructure problems. Does that affect the South too?
Definitely. While the South has relatively decent infrastructure compared to some other regions, there are still things to tackle.
Like what?
Urban congestion, energy shortages, and the need for better industrial corridors and logistics networks.
Right.
If they don't improve in those areas, it becomes harder to attract those big global investments.
It's about creating an environment where businesses can thrive. Okay, so are there any other concerns we should be aware of? Maybe something specific to the South's context?
Yeah, regional disparities within the South itself are an issue.
Okay, I see.
While states like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka are economic powerhouses, others like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana are still catching up when it comes to industrialization. That gap needs to be addressed.
So even within a successful region, there are pockets of inequality that need attention. What about climate change? How's that impacting the South? They rely a lot on agriculture and have a lot of coastal areas.
Climate change is a big threat. The South is vulnerable to droughts, cyclones, rising sea levels, all of which can disrupt livelihoods and damage infrastructure.
Yeah.
Economic development has to be sustainable and resilient, especially with these environmental challenges that are only going to get more intense.
A global challenge that needs local solutions. Are there any other pressing issues, maybe policy related, that we should be talking about?
Yes, there are a few policy challenges to consider. Many southern states depend heavily on financial transfers from the central government
Oh, okay.
that can limit their financial independence and make it tough to make decisions about how to allocate resources. Plus, rising state debt ratios are becoming a burden.
So it's a balancing act, staying financially responsible while still investing in the future. It sounds like the South has a lot to be proud of, but also a lot on its plate as it moves forward.
Exactly. The South is at a crossroads. They've got a strong foundation, but to keep their edge and tackle these challenges, they need to be adaptable and innovative.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into the complexities of the South's economy. We've uncovered so much, from ancient trade routes to those modern-day challenges of climate change and the need for those high-level skills in a globalized world.
Indeed, and it's clear that the South has a lot to teach us in terms of lessons learned and potential solutions. But where do they go from here? What are some concrete steps they can take to navigate these hurdles and achieve sustainable growth that benefits everyone?
That's the big question, and one we'll explore right after this.
So picking up where we left off, let's dive into some potential solutions for the South as they face these challenges. Remember the CEA's push for global benchmarking?
Right, he was urging them to compete globally. What specific areas did he highlight?
He actually pointed to Bengaluru as an example, saying it could rival California in terms of tech growth.
Bengaluru going head-to-head with Silicon Valley. That's a bold statement. What would it take to make that happen?
Well, tackling that productivity gap in manufacturing is crucial. Investing in upskilling programs and really embracing Industry 4.0 technologies like automation, data analytics, and smart manufacturing. Those are key to boosting output and efficiency.
So really getting on board with those cutting-edge technologies that are changing the game in manufacturing. We talked about infrastructure as a bottleneck, too. What needs to happen there?
They've got to strengthen those industrial corridors, logistics networks, and digital infrastructure. Those are essential for attracting global investment. Things like the Bharatmala Pariyojana project, which focuses on improving road connectivity, that's a good step.
Creating those connections both within India and with the rest of the world. What about other opportunities the South should be exploring? Any sectors where they have untapped potential?
Tourism. The South has incredible potential for tourism. Think about those stunning temples, beautiful coastlines, the rich cultural heritage.
Yeah.
Developing sustainable tourism initiatives could be a huge win. It would create jobs, boost revenue, and showcase the region's unique beauty to the world.
Turning those cultural assets into economic drivers. A lot of countries have done that successfully. We also talked about those financial challenges, those rising state debt ratios. How can they tackle that?
That's where some creative revenue generation comes in. They need to enhance tax collection, particularly through the GST system. And another option is to explore production-linked incentives, PLIs, to attract more manufacturing investment.
So finding those win-win solutions that benefit both the government and private businesses. We can't forget about those disparities within the South itself. How can they make sure that growth includes everyone and doesn't leave certain regions behind?
Absolutely. Initiatives like the Smart Cities Mission and the Regional Connectivity Scheme are great for developing those less industrialized areas within the South.
Making sure growth is more balanced, no region is left out.
Right.
So it's this multi-pronged approach, tackling infrastructure gaps, promoting skill development, fostering innovation, and ensuring growth benefits everyone. It's a lot to handle, But the South seems ready for the challenge.
They do. They really do. The South has always been adaptable and innovative. If they can keep building on their strengths and proactively address those weaknesses, they have the potential to become a true global economic powerhouse.
It's a really inspiring story, and one that offers lessons for other regions, too. Speaking of lessons, we can't ignore the contrast between the South's success and the challenges facing some northern states. What can the North learn from the South's experience? Any transferable lessons there?
That's a great point. The South's focus on human development, particularly in education and healthcare, is a valuable model.
Okay, yeah.
Kerala, with its almost universal literacy and amazingly low infant mortality rate, is a great example of what's possible when you invest in human capital.
It's like a blueprint for social progress. What are the specific parts of Kerala's model that could be adapted for other states, even if they have different socioeconomic realities?
Their public healthcare system is robust. They have a strong network of primary health centers and well-trained healthcare professionals, and that's been key to improving health outcomes.
It's proof that investing in people isn't just the right thing to do, it's also smart economically. Are there any other strategies the North could learn from?
Absolutely. The South's success in diversifying their economies beyond agriculture is something the North can learn from. They've traditionally relied heavily on agriculture, which can be risky. Weather patterns, market fluctuations, it's unpredictable.
Yeah, you're at the mercy of a lot of external factors.
Exactly. Developing a strong manufacturing and service sector makes those economies more resilient.
A more balanced portfolio ready for whatever comes their way. What about infrastructure? That's been a major obstacle for the North. Can they look to the South for guidance?
For sure. The South's experience with ports, industrial corridors, and efficient logistics networks is full of lessons. Projects like the Golden Quadrilateral Highway Network have done wonders for connecting different regions and boosting growth.
Yeah.
Similar initiatives in the North could really transform their transportation infrastructure. Lower logistics costs would make the region way more attractive for investors.
It's all about creating those arteries for commerce. Okay, so beyond those specific projects, are there broader policy lessons the North could pick up from the South? What are those intangible factors that have made them so successful?
The South's focus on good governance, with things like e-governance and transparent administrative processes, has played a huge role.
Streamlining everything, reducing corruption, making it easier for businesses to operate,
Exactly. It's about building trust and creating a level playing field.
making it fair for everyone. Are there other policy areas where the North can learn from the South's experience?
Definitely. The South's commitment to fiscal prudence, responsible financial management is another great lesson. They've kept debt levels low while still prioritizing key development
This is
areas.
a smart approach.
It really is. This disciplined approach has made them more stable and resilient, helping them navigate those economic downturns more effectively.
So it's about finding that balance, investing in the future without putting long-term financial stability at risk. Are there any other areas where the North could benefit from the South's expertise?
The South's focus on social inclusion and reducing inequality is also something the North can learn from. They've got policies aimed at empowering marginalized groups, promoting gender equality, ensuring everyone has access to quality education and health care.
Creating a more just and prosperous society.
Exactly. These initiatives are a model for other regions that are trying to create societies that are both economically successful and socially equitable.
It's that holistic approach to development. Okay, but let's flip the script for a minute. Are there any areas where the South could learn from the North? Is it just a one-way street, or can they learn from each other?
That's an interesting thought. While the South shines in things like education and healthcare, the North has done some amazing things in agriculture and renewable energy. The Green Revolution, which really changed India's agriculture, started in the North. And states like Gujarat are leading the way in solar energy production.
So it's not a one-way street. There's always something to learn from each other, no matter where you are in India. But let's zoom out a bit. Why is this whole discussion about regional disparities and learning from each other's successes important for our listeners, especially those who want to be IAS officers?
Great question. Understanding these regional differences is essential for anyone who wants to contribute to India's development and create effective policies.
Right.
IAS officers are often posted all over the country. They need to be aware of the unique challenges and opportunities in each region.
It's not just about what's in the textbooks. It's about applying that knowledge to real-life situations, being adaptable, and finding solutions that fit each unique context. How can our listeners use this knowledge to their advantage in the UPSC exam itself?
For prelims, understanding these economic and social indicators will definitely help you answer those fact-based questions.
Okay.
For mains, this knowledge can be used to analyze case studies, evaluate policies, and come up with well-rounded solutions to complex problems.
Showing that you have a deeper understanding of India's diverse realities and that you can think critically.
Exactly. It's what sets apart those who just memorize from those who truly understand how complex governing a diverse nation like India really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And remember, this deep dive is just the beginning.
Yeah.
We encourage you to keep exploring these issues, find specific examples, and form your own informed opinions. The more you engage with this stuff, the better prepared you'll be, not just for the exam, but for a fulfilling career in public service.
It's about equipping yourself to make a real difference in people's lives.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. We talked about how the South can learn from the North's successes in renewable energy and agriculture, but could it work the other way around?
Ooh, I like that. Could northern states adopt Kerala's successful model in healthcare and education to close that development gap? It's definitely something to think about. And it highlights how much potential there is for collaboration and learning between different regions.
It really makes you think about what solutions might work best in different situations. That's the beauty of India, right? So much diversity, so many different experiences, so many potential solutions to be found.
It's not about just copying and pasting. It's about figuring out the core principles and then adapting them to the specific challenge.
Exactly. That's a skill that's valuable for everyone, especially for those who are aiming for the IAS. Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to go over some key takeaways, things our listeners can use for their UPSC prep and also for their overall understanding of India's economic landscape.
Yeah, let's hear them.
First off, the South's success story shows us the power of long-term vision. They knew early on that investing in human development, especially in education and healthcare, would be essential, and they were spot on.
It's like they say the best investment is in people, not just in bricks and mortar.
Right. Second takeaway, adaptability. The South was ready for the opportunities that came with economic liberalization. They leveraged their strengths and brought in foreign investment to really get themselves onto that global economic stage.
It's about being proactive, not getting stuck in the past.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Third takeaway, balanced and sustainable development. The South has done a lot to diversify its economy, but they still have work to do, especially when it comes to manufacturing productivity and tackling climate change.
Progress is a journey, right? There's always more to do, new challenges to adapt to.
Well said. And last but not least, the South shows us how important good governance and administration are. Their commitment to transparency, e-governance, and a business-friendly environment has been a major part of their success.
It's not enough to have good policies, you have to implement them effectively.
You got it. And remember, these takeaways aren't just about the South. They apply to any region or sector in India. And that's what the UPSC is all about, connecting the dots, comparing, and using those broader concepts to understand specific situations.
It's like having this mental toolkit you can use to analyze any problem, whether it's in the exam or out in the real world as an IAS officer.
Exactly. This deep dive is just the beginning. We want you to keep exploring these topics, dig into specific examples, and come to your own conclusions. The more you engage with these complex issues, the better prepared you'll be, not just for the exam, but for a meaningful career in public service.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've covered a lot from the historical context to the challenges they face today and the possible solutions, all seen through the lens of the South's economic success.
It has been. I hope our listeners got a lot out of it. Remember, the UPSC journey is about more than just gaining knowledge. It's about developing your analytical skills, your ability to think critically.
So true. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your fellow UPSC aspirants. Every little bit of knowledge, every thought-provoking discussion can make a difference in your preparation. And be sure to leave a comment down below if you have any questions or want to discuss anything we talked about today in more detail.
And most importantly, never stop learning, never stop questioning, and never give up on that dream of becoming an IAS officer.
That's right. Until next time, keep pushing, keep learning, and best of luck on your UPSC journey.